All right, so get ready because we're about to take a deep dive into something that might sound a little strange at first. We're going to be looking at the idea that get this, we choose unhappiness.
Yeah, you heard that right.
But before you go thinking this is all about, toxic positivity or something.
You're right, like just slapping on a fake smile and pretending all your problems have magically disappeared.
Exactly. That's not what we're saying at all. It's more about,
It's about getting curious about the stuff going on under the surface, those hidden motivations behind how we feel. We're diving into some pretty useful knowledge about how our minds work. And our source material this time, it's a philosophical dialogue.
oh boy, philosophy. That sounds heavy.
I know, right? But trust me, this isn't just some abstract theory you'll forget as soon as you're done listening.
Okay, good. Because I have to admit, philosophy sometimes, it can feel a little, I don't know, out there.
Definitely.
So what's this dialogue all about then?
Well, it features this young guy, and he's basically going back and forth arguing with this philosopher. And of course, at some point, the philosopher brings up this whole idea, that we choose unhappiness. And the young guy, he's outraged.
Yeah, I can imagine. Who wouldn't be?
Right. He's basically like, hold on. Some people are born into really tough situations. The world can be a seriously unfair place. How can you say we choose this? And honestly, I kind of get where he's coming from.
I was going to say, I'm kind of with the young guy on this one. It does seem like, we're blaming people for stuff that's not their fault,
Yeah, his reaction is totally understandable. It's human nature to zero in on all that external stuff, the things that happen to us.
Right. Like, why me kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the philosopher throws in this curveball, this really interesting idea. He says it's not about denying that those external circumstances exist. It's about something changing internally.
So are we talking about, changing how we look at things instead of waiting for the whole world to change around us?
You got it.
Okay, so I'm trying to keep an open mind here, but I gotta say, I'm still a little skeptical.
I hear you. And so is the young guy in the dialogue. In fact, he doubles down at this point. He gets even more convinced that, no, some people are just born unhappy, like it's hardwired into them or something. And that's when the philosopher drops this total bombshell.
Oh, I bet this is good. What'd he say?
He looks at the guy and says, you are unhappy now because you chose to be unhappy.
Whoa. Okay, yeah, that's a lot to unpack. It does feel kind of like, almost like blaming the victim, doesn't it?
I know, right? And that's exactly why it's so important to understand the thought process behind this, the whole philosophy of it. The dialogue goes back to this classic Socratic idea. It's this idea that no one desires evil. And on the surface, that just sounds bonkers.
Yeah, I was going to say, the world's full of bad stuff. Are we just ignoring that? Well, hold on. Let me explain how the dialogue gets into this. So it says that even when somebody does something we see as bad, a truly bad thing, they're doing it because they somehow see it as beneficial. Like it's good for them in some way.
So they've justified it in their mind, even though, it's objectively wrong?
You got it.
Okay, I can kind of see that. Like a bank robber. They might try to tell themselves they need the money, even though, obviously, stealing is not okay.
That's a perfect example. And you know what? The source material actually uses the example of a crime, too. It talks about someone stealing to get financial security.
Okay, so it's like it's good for them in a really selfish way, not good in the way we normally think about.
Exactly. And the dialogue goes on to remind us that the original Greek word for good, it just meant beneficial, straight up beneficial. So even a criminal, in their own messed up way, they're going after something they think is beneficial to them. Okay, I think I'm starting to see how this connects back to choosing unhappiness. But it's a pretty big leap, right? How can being unhappy, like genuinely unhappy, how can that ever be beneficial?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. And it's precisely the question that the source material wants us to wrestle with. If even a criminal can convince themselves they're doing good, how much more subtly could we be doing this with our emotions?
Oh, interesting.
Like on some level, deep down, maybe we've decided that unhappiness actually serves us, even if we have zero clue that we've made that decision.
Wow, I have to admit, that's kind of mind-blowing. And a little unsettling, if I'm being honest. Like, it's making me think about my own emotions in a totally different way.
And you know what? That discomfort is a good sign.
Right.
It means you're really engaging with the ideas here. And just remember, the source material isn't trying to give us easy answers. It's more about raising the question and then letting us, explore it for ourselves.
So that's where the real deep dive begins, right? Figuring out what all this means for each of us.
Now you're getting it. That's where things get really interesting.
All right, so just to recap, we've been talking about this idea that even actions we consider bad are often driven by something the person sees as good,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And now we're like trying to apply that same logic to this whole idea of choosing unhappiness. I have to admit, this is a lot for my brain to handle right now. How can being unhappy ever be good for anyone?
Well, I think that's exactly what makes this concept so interesting and powerful. It challenges our assumptions about how our emotions really work. Like, what if underneath all that unhappiness, there are actually benefits we're holding on to, hidden benefits?
Okay, I'm trying to follow along here. I really am, but I'm kind of struggling to see what those benefits could even be. I mean, unhappiness hurts. Why would anyone cling to that?
Okay, so think about it this way. Unhappiness, it can be a way to get attention or sympathy from other people.
Oh, yeah.
And it can also, in some ways, almost be like a shield,
Right.
protecting us from having to take risks or face the things that scare us. Or maybe it even gives us some sense of identity.
Oh, you mean like?
Like, oh, I'm the tortured artist, or,
Mhm.
or I'm always the unlucky one.
Ah, I see. Yeah.
And those are just a few examples off the top of my head.
Wow. You know, I never really thought about it like that before. It's like unhappiness can become this, I don't know, this weird kind of comfort zone.
Exactly. And just to be clear, the source material isn't saying that these are conscious choices we're making. It's more like think of them as unconscious patterns that develop over time.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we even begin to sort of untangle those patterns? It all feels so abstract.
Well, the very first step is awareness.
There's that word again, awareness.
I know, right? But it really is fundamental to changing anything.
Yeah.
So what do we mean by awareness? It's about paying attention to our thoughts, our feelings, even our behaviors,
Mhm.
without judging ourselves.
Right. We don't want to add a bunch of self-criticism on top of everything else.
Definitely not. Think of it like you're a curious observer. You're just watching what's happening in your own inner world. You notice when those familiar patterns of unhappiness pop up. And you ask yourself, what am I getting from this? What purpose is this serving, even if it's totally roundabout?
So instead of asking, why am I so unhappy, we should be asking, what's this unhappiness doing for me?
You got it. And as you start asking yourself that question, you might be really surprised by the answers. Maybe it's a need for connection or a way to avoid taking responsibility. Maybe it's even a fear of success.
So it's like we're detectives trying to find clues to help us understand our own behavior.
I like that. And, once you begin to see those benefits of your unhappiness, those hidden benefits, then you can start to question things, challenge those beliefs that are keeping those patterns in place.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk more about those beliefs. How do they fit into all this?
Well, often our unhappiness comes from beliefs we have deep down about ourselves or the world. Things like, I'm not good enough, or life's unfair, or I'll never find love. And these beliefs, they turn into these almost like self-fulfilling prophecies.
Oh, yeah. Like if I keep telling myself I'm not good enough, then I'll probably act in ways that prove that, and then I'll end up feeling even more unhappy.
It's this vicious cycle. But hey, here's the good news. We can break free from that. We can challenge those limiting beliefs.
Okay, how do we actually do that? How do you challenge a belief that just feels so true?
You start by questioning it. Once you figured out what that belief is, that belief that's causing all this unhappiness, then you ask, is this really true? Do I have any proof? Is there a different way I could be looking at this situation?
So it's like putting those beliefs on trial, like really grilling them to see if they hold up.
Ah, I love that.
Yeah.
And you know what? Often when we really dig deep and scrutinize those negative beliefs, we find they're based on outdated information or fear or assumptions that aren't even true.
This is great. It's like we can take back control of our own minds instead of letting those old beliefs run the show.
That's the spirit.
Mm.
And, with that control, that's when we have the chance to choose new beliefs.
Yeah.
Beliefs that are, actually empowering, beliefs that support our happiness and well-being.
So it's not just about tearing down the old stuff. We're also building something new, something better to replace it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really exciting because once you start changing those core beliefs, your actions change and your experiences change too, naturally.
It's like a ripple effect. Changing our internal world leads to changes in our external world.
Absolutely. And it brings us right back to why we're doing this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
To help you create a life that's more in sync with your values, your goals, all those deep desires you have.
Wow. We've covered so much today. It feels like we've gone deep, but also like we're just scratching the surface. This whole idea, this choosing unhappiness thing, it's complex.
You're telling me it's definitely nuanced. And it takes, time and real effort to untangle these patterns we've developed. But I think the source material offers this really important message of hope. If we can choose unhappiness, we can choose the opposite. We have that power.
Okay, so before we wrap up this section, is there anything else you wanted to add about, challenging those beliefs? That feels like a really important step to focus on.
One thing I really want to emphasize is self-compassion. It's easy to get caught up in beating yourself up, especially when you start to realize all the ways you've been, contributing to your own unhappiness. But remember this, we're all works in progress, right? Be kind to yourself, be patient, and celebrate each step you take towards understanding yourself better.
Welcome back. It feels like we've been on this incredible journey,
Yeah.
exploring this whole idea of choosing unhappiness.
Yeah, it's been quite the deep dive.
We've talked about those hidden benefits we might actually be getting from our own, misery, and about how those deep-seated beliefs can really get in our way. But now, let's get practical. How do we actually start making different choices? Where do we go from here?
That's the question, isn't it? It's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
And with anything that's really worth it, there's no magic bullet. But the good news is we can learn a lot from both, ancient wisdom and modern psychology.
Where?
There are strategies that really work.
Okay, tell me more. I'm ready to put this into practice.
Well, I think we've already touched on the foundation. Self-awareness. It all starts there. Remember, it's about becoming a really good observer of what's going on inside you. Your thoughts, feelings, all of it. And doing that without judging yourself.
Right. We're not trying to beat ourselves up for feeling certain ways. It's more about curiosity, like we talked about before.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you're a scientist and you're studying your own mind. So when those familiar patterns of unhappiness show up, you don't just get swept away. You pause. You ask yourself, what's happening? What need is this emotion trying to meet, even if it's in this totally roundabout way?
It's funny because you mentioned earlier that unhappiness can sometimes be a way to, get attention or even dodge responsibility. And I'm realizing there are definitely times when I've, maybe not consciously, but kind of leaned into feeling sorry for myself, just to get sympathy from people.
You see, that's a perfect example of how this stuff plays out.
Right.
And it's not about being manipulative or anything. It's often just this unconscious pattern. And once you see it, once you become aware of it, that's when you can start making different choices.
So awareness is step one. What comes after that?
Well, then it's about getting to the root of the problem. Challenging those beliefs that are driving those patterns. We were talking earlier about how beliefs like, I'm not good enough, can almost become, self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah.
So once you know what that belief is, that belief that's fueling all that unhappiness, it's time to put it on trial.
I like that. Put it on trial. Okay, but how do we actually do that?
Ask yourself, is this belief even true? Really, truly true? What evidence do I have to back it up? And maybe the most important question, is there another way to look at this whole situation?
Okay, so for example, if I'm hanging on to this belief that I'll never find love, I might stop and ask myself, wait, is that really true? Have I met every single person on the planet and none of them could love me? Probably not, right?
Exactly. And you might even ask yourself, what experiences have I had that might prove this belief wrong? Maybe you've got some amazing friendships or even past relationships that, maybe they didn't work out in the end, but they showed you that you were capable of being loved.
I can already feel how good this is just thinking about it. It's like we're taking back control from those old beliefs, those limiting beliefs that have been running the show for way too long.
That's what it's all about. And remember, this is a process. It's ongoing. Those old beliefs might try to sneak back in sometimes. But the more you practice challenging them, the less power they'll have over you.
So it's like working a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And as you get stronger, you can start choosing new beliefs, beliefs that are more helpful, beliefs that support you, your happiness, and everything you want to achieve.
Okay, so we're not just tearing down the old stuff. We're building new, better stuff in its place. What does that look like in real life?
Well, it might mean trying out affirmations, your positive self-talk, or surrounding yourself with people who are really supportive and want to see you grow. It could also mean going out and trying new things that challenge those old beliefs and help you build new ones, positive ones.
Okay, so say I'm stuck in that I'm not good enough belief. What could I try?
Well, you could start focusing on all the things you're good at, celebrating all your accomplishments, even the small ones. Maybe taking on some new challenges, things that push you outside your comfort zone a bit.
I see. So I start gathering evidence that shows the old belief is wrong.
You got it. And as you do that, you'll start seeing yourself differently. And that new perspective, that's powerful stuff. It affects everything.
This is amazing. It feels like we're really getting to the core of this whole idea. Choosing happiness, it's not just like thinking happy thoughts. It's about changing our beliefs, changing our actions to create a life that feels good.